It's time for NuWho Review with your host, Farrar Hutkins, and guests, Lewis Nauman and Alex Cannon. We're back, episode 3, for no known reason. This time we're looking at Robin of Sherwood. Actually, no, it's Robot of Sherwood, which I'm sure was a play on Robin of Sherwood.
Well, it's got to be because
old BBC series.
Without giving too much away, it should be Robots of Sherwood.
It should, but I think Robot of Sherwood actually referred to a specific robot. I assume the title Robot of Sherwood refers to the sheriff, because the doctor thought Robin Hood was a robot, but there actually was a robot. It wasn't him.
Oh, yeah, that's the misdirection, I guess, in the
So
title.
I think it might have been a little misdirection, because when we saw the preview of the episode and we knew that it was called Robot of Sherwood, the preview included the doctor saying he's not a real person, and then there he is. So I think it was a nice little bit of misdirection on the part of the writers, because we go into the episode thinking, oh, Robin Hood's a fictional character, he has to be the robot. But, surprise!
Old-fashioned heroes only exist in old-fashioned storybooks, Clara.
And what about you?
Me?
Yeah, you. You stop bad things happening every minute of every day. That sounds pretty heroic to me.
Just passing the time.
We've hit the third episode, so we're deeply into the comedy. First of all, to all of the people who are completely picking this episode apart, it's okay. This was not meant to be taken seriously. Look at Robin winking at the camera before the credits even rolled.
Yeah, even with a little ding
That's
noise,
your,
come on.
That's your clue.
This is real light stuff.
You called?
What did we like about this episode, apart from the fact that it was so much lighter and it gave Capaldi an opportunity to flex his sitcom chops?
Yeah, that's my favorite thing about it. You know, it was great seeing this darker doctor in a comedy role, and of course, you know, he's got to play it off like, say, Oliver Hardy to Stan Laurel or Bud Abbott to Lou Costello. He's going to play it straight.
He's got to be the straight man.
He's got to be the straight man, but he's very good at it. And the comedy is there. It's all in the timing. And I thought he played really well off of Robin Hood. Every scene was gold. You know, there was a lot of heart there, a lot of great interplay, and it was just a joy to watch. I just watched it again, and I thought it was even better the second time.
I really loved Clara. I loved that she had a fangirl moment in this episode where she talks to the doctor and she just kind of drooled over Robin, and then she's like, oh my God, it's him. And I think most of the females out there would, if you ever had a moment in the TARDIS, we would probably react the same way if we got to see a hero. So I think a lot of girls will identify with her, and hopefully we can actually love her more. Because I've hated her up until this point.
Yeah.
So
I think that makes perfect sense. After all, we've got a lot of fanboys running the show now.
Yeah. And
Mark.
I must say, it's very apparent that they're trying to do their take on Classic Who. You know, as a Classic Who viewer, I gotta say, I'm enjoying it. I really am. It's not exactly like it used to be, but the nods and the winks are there. A lot of references for us old faithful. And, yeah, I'm enjoying it.
And I thought the dialogue in this episode was nice. I mean, people were complaining that they were using words like mechanicals and machinery when in the 11th century they wouldn't know those words.
but they had robots.
Well, and I was just thinking, but the TARDIS translates. It's going
Yeah,
to translate
but-
from Middle English into
right.
modern English, so that's not even an issue.
True
You're right.
enough.
But the dialogue
Right.
itself, the way people spoke, I thought the episode was written, even though it was a comedy, I think it was written for a little more intelligent of an audience. Not everything was completely telegraphed to us, the viewers. We had some nice wordplay that was, lost on the kids, but the grown-ups watching would have enjoyed it. To me, that's really the hallmark of a family show. It's not when you take one episode and make it for the grown-ups and make another episode for the kids. It's when you have all of the elements in a single episode.
Yeah.
Like
And
fun
people
references
can get
and
different
wordplay.
levels, different layers.
Right.
Exactly. And it makes you want to watch it again when you're older and catch stuff later, which I think this generation of kids growing up watching this will probably want to do again.
I hope so.
I had the situation well in hand.
Long-haired ninny versus robot killer knights. Whenever I'd put my money.
If you had not betrayed me, I would have been triumphant.
You would have been a little puff of smoke and ashes. Ha! You'd have been floating around in tiny little laughing bits in people's goblets.
Balderdash. Ha!
Oh, right, here we go. It's laughing time.
The only thing I didn't enjoy about this episode were the scenes with Robin and the Doctor sniping at each other. I thought they went on just a little bit too long.
Maybe.
But then again, we are still establishing this Doctor's character, and if you look at the actual dialogue in there, it does kind of move along to where you can tell that the reason that the Doctor and Robin are sniping at each other is not because they're trying to impress Clara and be her new boyfriend, but because Clara said earlier in the episode that she likes epic heroes.
Yeah.
And he said, since when did you start believing in mythic heroes or something like that? And she looks at him and says, really? Like, well, yeah, she went along with you. There's the answer to that question. And
Yeah, she didn't even have to dignify that with a response, did she?
right. And here they, and here all three of them are completely trapped. Two mythic heroes and the sidekick. And the mythic heroes are totally powerless because, well, they're chained to blocks, basically.
Yeah.
That was really the only thing that I had a problem with, apart from the very, very end. And I really have to forgive whoever did this, the golden arrow puncturing the spaceship hull. That was the only part where I really kind of cringed and went, oh, really?
Yeah, really, you couldn't come up with anything more,
Something more original.
believable?
Yeah.
Right. Well, I think a lot of people criticized the Matt Smith era for all the hand-waving, quick explanations of things off
Yeah.
the bat. But that's kind of a hallmark of Doctor Who. I mean, you take 8 seconds of dialogue and have the Doctor say, all it needs is an extra boost of power and they'll get it from the golden arrow. Aim for the intake vent. Taken care of.
Yeah.
But they chose to go full comedy with it, put a target on the spaceship, and they aimed for the target, and of course it hit.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. But, it had a satisfying explosion at the end, and that's always good for an ending.
Yeah, they didn't have an explosion at the beginning, so they had to have
Right.
one at the end. Doctor Who has to have stuff blow up.
You got to have an explosion. Think of all the episodes that were solved that way. Pirate Planet, Destiny of the Daleks.
Well, anytime you get to explode Daleks, that's a solution.
Yeah, yeah. Well, spaceships
like blowing up
exploding,
Cybermen.
Spaceships exploding, including, I think, the one that actually gave this episode its idea.
The Time Warrior.
The spaceship castle is from State of Decay.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. I was thinking of the Time Warrior where the rocket taking off destroyed the castle.
Right? Yeah, another good explosion at the well, actually another not so good explosion.
Well,
in that episode, but this episode draws heavily from Time Warrior, where you've got a robot dressed up as a knight, the trappings, all the the time of the Crusades. This episode draws heavily from King's Demons too. In fact, this character of the Sheriff of Nottingham looks almost exactly like Anthony Ainley looked in disguise in that episode. On top of that, you've got the Doctor name-checking a device, the MacGuffin from Carnival of Monsters.
the miniscope.
The miniscope.
Right.
He thought he was in a miniscope. And then, later in the episode, he gives Robin a good karate chop with height! Just like the third Doctor would have done. So I think he just got to fulfill a childhood fantasy right there.
I'm waiting for a big action-packed scene with the Doctor and his Venusian Aikido and Clara and her Taekwondo. They can whip some Cyberman butt.
Yeah.
'Cause
I would watch an episode like that.
They're both going to be so much faster than the Cybermen with their Aikido.
Are we
and
getting
Taekwondo.
Cybermen later on this season?
I don't know, but I know Capaldi's not going to leave the role without Cybermen
No.
featuring in at least one of his stories.
Yeah.
I'm impatient to hear your story.
Oh. But I do not have one. I was lying.
Lying.
Yeah. People are so much better at sharing information if they think the other person has already got it.
Yeah, this was a good episode, and part of the reason that I think it worked was because they really played on the whole reality versus legend thing.
Yeah.
I thought the references to Marxism in the episode were really cute because when you have Robin Hood saying things like property is theft, and you have the Doctor saying he's the opiate of the masses, he's their false hope, and the Peasants' Revolt. I think the sheriff referred to the Peasants' Revolt.
Lots of little borrows from all over the place in this episode.
Yeah, and I thought, how funny is that to put the seeds of Marxism in the late 11th century in England
Yeah.
in the hands of a character who disappears without trace from history except only as legend. It could be seen as the writer just borrowing from things that he already knew. On the other hand, it could be seen as a definite tongue-in-cheek reference to, hey, maybe Robin Hood was the first Marxist.
Yeah.
He could have been.
Yeah,
and
that's-
after all, if
that's
he was a
subtle,
real
but-
character, Sure, why not? That's the kind of thing that Douglas Adams would do.
Yeah.
You know, he would throw something way back into history, and then the legend is born of that character.
Exactly right. If you're going to do
hundreds of
something
years
anachronistic,
later.
you can ground it like that.
Right, and I think they did a great job with that.
Well, what does every oppressed peasant workforce need? The illusion of hope. Some silly story to get them through the day, lull them into docility, and keep them working. Ship's databanks, full of every myth and legend you could hope for, including Robin Hood.
Oh, the spaceship. That was another thing that I was going to mention. Did that seem a little pantomime theater to you?
You mean the set?
Yeah, the set
that they
itself.
were on. It was pretty cheap.
It reminded me a little bit of the Three Doctors, where they meet Omega, and Omega's lair is basically just a bunch of walls with paint kind of thrown up in random blobs to create interesting patterns. If you were sitting 8th row back in the theater, it looked really interesting, but under the harsh studio lights and videotape, it just looked kind of like, what were they thinking?
Yeah, it's just cheap.
Really budget.
Tell you what, though, Alex, you do need to watch that episode just for the interplay between the doctors bickering.
Okay.
If you haven't seen Three Doctors, you need to see that because it's
Okay.
always great to see the doctors fighting.
Which brings back the Robin-Doctor dynamic.
Yeah.
You have two versions of an epic hero who, in their way, have become myth and legend. And they're sparring at each other verbally.
Right, and one of them always has to adopt the dour, stolid outlook, and the other one always has to go light. And that's the way British comedy works. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, a couple of nits that I have to pick, though, in the dialogue. If we are in the late 11th century, we're looking at chivalry in England. And if the Sheriff of Nottingham is supposed to be a member of the nobility, and I believe he was at the time, Clara's reason as an English teacher who probably studied Old English literature, when he says, why should I tell you? Her real reason should be, because I asked you. In the Code of Chivalry, if a damsel asks a knight to do something politely, he must do it. It's one of the, it's part of the courtesy of being a knight. I'd say that as since they're writing her character to be an English teacher, and since she is an English teacher, she knows all about Robin Hood. I thought that was it's a minor thing.
Opportunity missed.
They did come up with a good reason, and it still showed her to be very clever.
Yeah.
One of the things I liked about Claire is she's very clever in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
They really did gloss over a lot of contemporary culture. It just didn't actually impinge on the plot at all. The plot was just continually rocketing forward without any real regard for the depth of what was actually going on at the time.
Yeah,
It was a light episode. You can't expect too much history.
If they had chosen, they being the writer and the production team, I think if they had chosen to make this a classic Doctor Who historical adventure and not a comedy, they could have split it into two parts. And they could have got very deep both into the literature history of Robin Hood and also into the alien spaceship stuff.
Sure.
It's almost as if Mark Gatiss had this script ready and waiting on a shelf, and they threw the Promised Land thing in there as a reference because it's the third episode of the season and we want to keep that going.
Well, yeah, and I guess in case anybody has not noticed, once again, we've got cyborgs. We've got... creatures that are robots and humans mashed together, and they're looking for the Promised Land. And yeah, it's starting to fall into a bit of a pattern. I wonder if every episode this season's going to contain robots and/or cyborgs.
And references to the Promised Land.
Yeah.
Missy wasn't in it. That was a kindness.
Yeah,
So, yeah, you were
I
right.
was glad
We
she
didn't have
wasn't
to
there.
get that again.
Unfortunately, I was also right that Mark Gatiss and science don't get along very well. But there was something that you mentioned last time also, which was Androids of Tara.
Yeah.
Which I went back and watched as preparation for this episode, just in case. But it wasn't quite as much like it as I expected.
No, not at all.
That was actually kind of a relief, because Androids of Tara was a lighthearted 4-episode story, which in the VHS edition that I had from years ago condensed down to 90 minutes.
Yeah.
So there's not a whole lot of
No, it's
material
pretty
there.
thin. Right.
Robin Hood laughs in the face of all.
And do people ever punch you in the face when you do that?
Not as yet.
Lucky I'm here then.
I have to say I love the Doctor fighting with the spoon. I thought that was really funny.
Yes.
And I don't know if they were trying to make it like a tribute toward the 7th Doctor, because he always played the spoons. But I thought that was, and also maybe a reference that maybe this Doctor won't use the sonic screwdriver so much, because the newer Doctors have been relying heavily on the sonic.
I don't think he'll be able to, because wasn't it still in the castle when it blew up?
Well, I thought he got it back, or maybe he didn't.
Oh, did he?
I thought, but maybe I missaw that.
We're gonna have to look that up, because
If he did, I missed that scene.
yeah, if they're doing the
That's a
visitation
good-
over again,
He should have said, "I feel like I've lost an old
yeah,
friend."
that was a big moment in
Yeah.
the fifth Doctor's
Well, I
tenure.
thought maybe
They actually
I thought maybe
destroyed the
Clara
Sonic
grabbed it,
Yeah.
but
at
I
that
could be
point.
wrong.
She may have.
But I mean,
Maybe
I can't
Clara
remember.
grabbed it?
Yeah, maybe, because she was sitting there talking to him and being sneaky at dinner. But I don't.
True.
Okay.
If she did make her way to the end of the table, she could have grabbed the sonic screwdriver with.
For some reason, I thought maybe she had grabbed it, but I don't know why I thought that.
She may have.
Yeah.
As I said, she's getting, as they're writing her character better and better, she's getting cleverer and cleverer. So she may have that little sleight of hand to get past the sheriff, and I wouldn't put it past her. But if the sonic screwdriver was in the castle when it blew up, then he's going to have to make a new one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think he's perfectly capable of making a new one anytime he wants to. It's it's just like psychic paper. There's no reason for him not to have it.
Right.
What I have a problem with is them making the Sonic do anything, just anything that they want, whether it makes sense or not.
Yeah, or in the episode when he blew up the target, which is made of straw.
But wait
Yeah.
a minute.
I thought, that's crazy. But then at the end of the episode, when he said there was a homing device in it,
Right.
I thought,
Right.
okay,
Yeah.
well,
Oh,
he
that
didn't,
makes sense,
He
yeah.
didn't
Yeah.
blow up the target. He blew up
the
a homing
homing
device.
device. Yeah.
And that's what it was.
Yeah, total
Yeah.
cheat.
Right.
Yeah, because when he did that, I was like, wait, I thought all you can do is assemble a cabinet with the screw. Like when it blew up. I was
Right, I was
thinking
like,
of
wait,
the
you
War
can't-
Doctor's line. Yeah.
It doesn't work on wood, so it's not going to work on straw either.
Yeah.
The archery target homing device was probably the cleverest thing, I guess, that Mark Gatiss added to the whole thing. Everything else in this episode was basically recycled, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Including the costumes.
Yeah.
I mean, even Clara said, I don't think this is quite right. And no, it wasn't. She's about 100 years out of step. Her clothing was more early Renaissance, but it looked gorgeous. I mean,
Yes.
there were people who were like, oh,
Yeah, when she walked out there, I was like, it's the Doctor goes to the Renaissance Fair. That's like when she walked out the door.
Exactly.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, the Doctor goes to Renaissance
when
Fair.
they had that big crane shot of the archery contest, I thought, did they film this at a Renaissance fair? Because they've got the tents and the people,
That would have been-
the vendors and that kind of thing. It'd be a great way to save money. Honestly, to just go on location and CGI the rest of the sky, and
Yeah.
that would have been
Oh,
fun.
there's plenty of CGI shots in this. A lot of invisible CGI. And the crane shot itself was a composite of several different. They didn't have to get that many extras. Yeah, not exactly a super low budget episode, but also a lot of production value for their money just by going outside in the countryside and just shooting away.
Well, and they obviously picked where to put their money. Yeah, the spaceship set looked kind of cheap, but we only saw it for 8 minutes?
Yeah.
Tops. I mean, there were a couple of scenes in there, a couple of long shots. Everything else was close-ups of the Doctor and Robin looking at screens and the big globe, which was, I guess, the top of the engine. That was never adequately
That looked like it
explained.
was reused from the Snowman episode.
Yeah, I bet you're right.
Yeah, it probably was.
Yeah. No, so I was
Yeah.
I think they reused that.
Yeah,
the
there were.
Robot Knights were cool, but, fairly throwaway Doctor Who villain there.
They didn't try to squeeze any previous villains into this. It would have been really over the top if we had had Daleks of Sherwood,
Wow.
or
Yeah.
Cybermen of Sherwood.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that would have been terrible.
Or gone to the castle and there had been weeping angels there for the nth time.
Wow.
That-
I think Gatiss did a good job of putting together an original story that didn't rely too much on previous Doctor Who lore.
No, even though it paid tribute to it left and right.
Right. Mostly with dialogue. That's
Dialogue and little situational borrows, like, for instance, that spaceship doesn't have enough power. It's going to explode. Well, it's City of Death right there.
right.
A lot of borrows, but it's okay,
Yeah, it worked. And by and large, the opinions of the younger crowd, 6-year-olds, the 8-year-olds, the 10-year-olds, they loved it.
I'd call this a good one to start people off with.
Right.
Yeah.
I would go
think
that
so.
far.
I think so, because neither the Doctor nor Clara bring a lot of baggage to this episode.
No.
You could start fresh with this one and come off pretty well. On the other hand, if you skipped this episode, the only thing you miss as far as any story arcs are the reference to the Promised Land.
Right.
Because once again, we have the robots from the future landing on Earth in search of the Promised Land. It's already been done, and we have just another reference to it. That really is the only thing.
Right. Just kind of
It almost seems as if it was sandwiched in there.
a little nod. Yeah, it was just an afterthought. Probably the script is not terribly new, I would think.
Kind of like Missy. You have to see it twice. Otherwise, it doesn't establish a pattern.
Right.
We've seen it twice. now in the first
Well, I mean, he
episodes.
explicitly checked it, too.
Right. But if you missed this episode, you missed that reference, and that's about it.
Taken from your friend's strange tunic. An intriguing gallimaufry, including this wand. Evidently a thing of awesome power.
We talked about the sheriff being a robot. Not everybody has seen the deleted scene, which reveals that.
Well, it makes it really explicit, doesn't it?
Yeah, he does.
Right,
He does.
because they
have
showed
his head come off,
right,
and then get reattached.
and get reattached, and him talking to you. But if you kind of suspect it, even without that scene, you kind of think that he's a robot,
Yeah.
and then when you cut away when he's in the vat of gold or whatever.
Yeah, the
Right,
cauldron.
where his hand is, Terminator style.
Right, the hands
Yeah.
are there sort
Because I
of
kind of thought that
frozen in
was kind of
place.
odd, and I was like, how did that happen?
Yeah, and he
So,
mentioned
yeah.
it too. He was like, a man who was half engine, and he actually said that during the fight. And I had to kind of
Right. It
pause and
wasn't-
maybe rewind that a little bit just to see, like, well, is he insinuating that he's a robot too? And I didn't think they would ever follow up on that, but I suppose they cut that bit out
Right.
because of, the beheadings in the Middle East.
Yeah, but it also just wasn't really necessary to the episode. We
Right.
had the
For time, I
we
thought
had
it
the
was fine.
dialogue, and then we had the hands sticking out of the cauldron at the end. It was obviously him. Those were not the hands of the robot knights. Those were obviously his hands because they looked more human.
Right.
And as soon as I saw that, I said, "Oh, he must have been a robot too."
Right.
And the point
So-
was made.
Explains a lot.
I guess as a British literature student, when I saw the deleted scene, I immediately thought of the legend of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight.
Oh yeah.
That scene where Gawain chops the knight's head off, it rolls around, and it speaks.
Yeah.
And I thought, now that's interesting because that was a 12th century story. And here we are in the late 11th century.
Yeah, another source of
yeah.
legend.
So that would have
And
been...
Robin Hood's wearing green. Maybe another green.
Wow,
a
but that's
color
why he put that in
reference.
there. That's brilliant.
Could have
Yeah.
been. It could have been the reason that it was in there. But I can obviously see why it was cut. First of all, because of the beheadings in the news. Second of all, for time.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
they were already at 45 minutes.
Right.
And the episode worked fine without it.
Yeah. I mean, you really.
If you
didn't
had
need
to
it.
excise something, that's what you would do.
I didn't understand the spaceship actually being the castle because wasn't there? That's the one thing I would have liked them that fluffed out because wasn't there supposed to be a castle there originally? That's why I was kind of because I mean that's the myth that we always know that the sheriff's always hanging out in the castle and
Yeah, but in the legend, Nottingham Castle was on the edge of a cliff, wasn't it? So it could be that this was
just a different castle.
like the original castle, which got blown up, and then he moved to the real castle, which is where the legend.
Yeah, they kind of gloss
Yeah.
over it all. I mean, after
Yeah.
all, the crash of the spaceship.
I mean, I guess it
Who
could have been
knows
where
what
it
that-
was.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
but you don't have that without seeing that deleted scene that it fell on him. So
Right.
so I was just like, okay, how did the castle get there? That's what I kept thinking. I was like, how like
That's true. There was that punchline in the deleted scene of him basically coming out and admitting that the castle fell on him.
Right.
Good punchline. And
Or
that
well, yeah,
had
the
to go
ship,
too.
the sky ship fell on him.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, again, we're dealing with reality versus legend. I mean, for the exact same reason that you see Robin Hood stealing but not giving to the poor, reality versus legend. The legend is that he gives back to the poor. The reality may just be that he was a really good thief.
Yeah.
The legends date from centuries after when he might have lived. So why not have reality be different from the legend? It frequently is. So the thing with the castle might
Yeah.
just be part of that whole
Yeah.
reality versus myth
Myth, right.
thing.
Same as Little John when they did their little joke with Little John.
Right.
Well, not to mention, you can't have these knights going around blowing people up with purple crosses on their foreheads and not have that in the myth as well.
Right.
That didn't make it into the stories, did it?
Nope. I also like the fact that Clara says, it's a trap. And he says, of course it's a trap.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
kind
I
of
love
basically
that.
acknowledging the fact that we're not going there to win. We're going there to steal the golden arrow.
Right.
Whether we win or not.
Yeah.
And when they have it later, the doctor says, what, you took the arrow? And the friar says, of course we did. We're robbers.
Yeah.
Well, that was the whole point of going there
Yeah,
in the
going-
first
yeah,
place.
yeah. Right.
Whether you win or lose, somebody's going to walk out with that thing because they're a band of thieves.
Right. And then they say the line there where this could feed a family of
Yeah, it
for
could
so many
feed a
years.
family of 12 or something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, what are you going to do with a golden arrow? Melt it down. Sell it. It's not much good on its own, except as a curiosity, I guess.
You are creating a matrix of gold to repair the engine circuit.
This is the scheme the mechanicals have devised. Soon this skyship will depart. Destination, London.
Overall impressions?
I loved it.
I loved it. I'm glad that not every episode is like this, but, you know, I've got a soft spot for comedy episodes. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think Doctor Who and comedy go very well together, especially if you have actors who can pull it off. And the casting for this was spot on. I thought Robin was great. Clara's doing well with all the different material that's being thrown at her.
I loved her in this episode. Really did.
Yeah. Jenna Coleman hasn't got a lot of comedy during Matt Smith's tenure.
No, not really.
And it was nice to see her handling it
Her
just as well as
she really has been rebooted, you know?
Yeah.
Her original purpose as a plot device is long past, and now she's coming into her own. I can actually deal with her now as a character, whereas before I didn't really think she was much of a companion.
No, and honestly, the impression that I got of Clara in her first couple of episodes kind of led me to think, geez, did they pick the wrong actress for this? I mean, she's not doing very well.
Yeah.
But it was not her, it was just the fact
the writing, I
that she
think.
didn't have a lot to do.
Yeah.
And now she does, and she's just growing into the role brilliantly, I think.
Goodbye, Doctor. Time Lord of Gallifrey.
Goodbye, Robin Hood, Earl of Locksley.
And remember, Doctor, I'm just as real as you are.
Next up,
I didn't actually see the preview.
It was awesome.
Yeah?
It was Monsters Under the Bed.
Oh, yeah, I did see that.
it's
Okay,
another
I did see-
nightmare episode called Listen.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay.
And you see hands coming out under the bed. It looked really cool. And you get to see Pink, which I don't know if it's a future version of Pink or
Yeah, his hair was different.
his hair, and he had a beard, and he's wearing a orange spacesuit.
Yeah.
So kind of
Orange
like
spacesuits seem to be a thing in Doctor Who. Tennant
Yes.
had
Yeah,
one.
that's what I
Could
was
it be
saying.
like a flashback to his time in Unit?
maybe that's what I was
Maybe.
thinking too.
If he
I
was in
thinking,
Unit, you know?
Yeah.
See, that's
or
what I was
something like
thinking
that.
when they
or Mars.
when
Maybe
they gave him that hair.
Maybe
I thought,
he was on. Maybe he was on Mars. Did they have the orange spacesuit on
Anything's
Mars?
possible.
Well, they
Although
had-
that's way in the future, though.
Yeah.
they had him in a spacesuit with more hair. They also had Clara holding the hand of a young boy whose complexion was very similar to Samuel Anderson, who plays Danny Pink. And I'm thinking, are we going back in time to see his own nightmares?
Oh, wow.
Ooh, that
From
would
his
be-
childhood on up into adulthood. That could explain the whole have you ever killed anyone who's not a soldier and him getting very quiet and reticent about it.
And then we saw a silhouette in red that everybody has been talking about before the season even started.
Nice.
Well-
Because they want to know who that is, who's Clara looking at. That's
That
what
could be
everybody's been
anything.
talking about.
That could be anything. Yeah.
Well, if there's one thing that Doctor Who does really well, it's English horror. So if we're getting that next, then
Two things that Doctor Who has always done well, gothic horror
Yeah.
and comedy. And we've got the comedy, and now it's time for gothic horror again.
great. All right.
Well, Monsters Under the Bed next time,
All right.
guys.
Looking forward.
Thanks. Keep the lights on.
NuWho Review was produced and hosted by Farrar Hutkins. The guests were Louis Dobbin and Alex Cannon. The opening theme music was performed by Louis Dobbin, and music performed by the Consortium of Genius. Email your questions or comments to whovoreview@gmail.com.